everyone, and welcome. My name is Matt Beck. I own Floatate, and I'm the chair of the Content and Education Committee here at the FTA. Thanks for joining us for tonight's webinar. We are incredibly excited to share something that's been months in the making. Tonight, we're unveiling the newly updated and revised North American Float Tank Standard. Yeah. This document hasn't been updated since 2017, so the refresh is long overdue. I want to give a huge shout out goes to our Sanitation and Regulation Committee for their tireless work over the past 8 months or so, reorganizing, rewriting, and refining this important document. The updated standard is meant to serve as an industry best practices guide, a central resource you can use when working with local health departments and educating regulators about how float tanks operate. It outlines how float tanks are cleaned, maintained, and monitored, and how they differ from pools and spas, all using language that aligns with what health officials are already familiar with. Our hope is that float centers across North America and beyond can use this standard to inform their internal procedures and build better relationships with local authorities. And going forward, we plan to keep this a living document with regular updates as the industry grows and evolves. We're joined by two of the leading voices in float tank sanitation and safety this evening. First up, Dr. Roy Vore. Roy is the senior consultant at Roy and Associates and one of the world's top experts in pool and spa microbiology. He's contributed to the CDC's Model Aquatic Health Code, written manuals for the NSPF, and published over 70 scholarly papers on biocides, microbial safety, and recreational water illness. Roy became interested in float tanks because of their unique physiology and their potential as non-pharmaceutical stress relief tools. He's also into beer brewing and bird watching. And yes, those two hobbies go together quite well. Also joining us tonight is Corey Costanzo. Corey is a licensed counselor and somatic trauma therapist with deep experience in bodywork and addiction recovery. He spent time at the Esalen Institute, created the didgeridoo meditation, and teaches mindfulness practices to incarcerated men. Corey also runs a thriving float and wellness center in Asheville, North Carolina, and somehow still finds time to hang with his family and work on their micro farm. We're so grateful to have both Roy and Corey for sharing their time and expertise with us tonight. Let's hear from them, and then we're excited to hear your questions and thoughts as well. So I'll hand it over to you two.
Corey, you're the chair. I'm only the second wheel on this one. It's like,
Well, that introduction was extremely thorough. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. I wanna say the reason why I was interested in this committee to start with is because of my 12-year relationship with the North Carolina Health Department, and it was really scary in the beginning, and continues to be one of those bittersweet relationships that at one point almost put me out of business because of lack of education of the from the health department. So this document, I think, is so important for not only my business, but for the float industry in general. And I feel like it's paving the way, the the floodgates to be able to open up for people to be able to open up centers without running the risk of having to close them because of health departments all over the country not understanding. Uh, I'm so excited to co-present or be here with Roy because I mean, Roy, you are just a keeper of so much knowledge and wisdom and rules in the industry and languaging and all that stuff. So yeah, I look forward to that. And also we have some OGs here. Ashcon, so excited that you're here with everything that you've put forth towards originally being one of the original writers of this particular standard and everything that you know about the float industry and about sanitation and all that. And then I saw some other folks that I won't name right now, but there's some great eyeballs here, some great minds here that are hopefully going to be participating in a conversational style webinar. Yeah. So Roy, I want to give you an opportunity to say some words. How you
Let,
doing?
let me just start off and ask the really interesting question. How many people in here have multiple copies of some standard, whether it be electrical or plumbing or wiring, readily available that you can turn around and grab right now? Come on, raise your hands. Come on. How many of you? Come on. I see you laughing, Jackie. All right, yeah, okay. You mean you telling me that you don't have a handful of standards just readily available? Yeah, don't say a word, Genevieve. You know where I got all these. If you look down there on the list, one of the people I work with at PHTA is Genevieve Lynn on here, and I'm glad she's joined us on here because I need to give her a bunch of credit for some of the work that I do with PHTA on there. But it's standards are a weird, very peculiar, isolated section of technical information that, unless you are either really geeky or unfortunate, you probably will never run into in your life. But the people that wired your float center, plumbed your float center, put in the HVAC system, all of them had standards and codes, and they have to live within that. And so they are a critical aspect of all of our lives that, unless you're in that technical aspect, you will probably never run into. And this might be your first encounter or one of these things. It's like, but before we get into this, let me say it's like this: what you're going to see tonight is the third version of the North American Float Tank Standard. And we have Mr. Mustache, Ashcon, with us. And he started this thing back in 2017 or even earlier than that on there. And so for the Sanitation and Regulation Committee to pick up from where that started was a whole lot easier than what Ashcon and that team had to go through back many, many years ago. So all we're doing was just polishing that and putting it in a slightly different format. And let me just say, it's like the content change is relatively minor on here. What's really changed on here is the way we're marketing the material. Because it was the original version, the first version, and the second version were written in language that all of you would probably naturally understand very readily. But everybody on here is in sales. You have somebody walk into your float center and go, I don't know whether I want to buy a membership. I don't like. Do you use the exact same selling technique with them that you do with somebody that walks in and goes, I want to float in that one, and I want to float in that one, and I want to float in that one. That one today, that one tomorrow, and that one then, and pulls the credit card out. So you got two different types of customers in here. And float center owners are one type of customer, and the original float tank standard was written for you. But health officials speak a little different language than. I see the smile, Jackie. I see the smile on your face. They speak a different language than all of us. And so basically what we did was we took the basic standard, remodeled it, and we put it into a language that a health inspector would be more familiar with. Now, what are they going to be familiar with? Standard one, public swimming pools, public spas, permanently installed residential spas, residential swimming pools. Yeah. Residential in-ground, residential portable, and the internet. Yeah. Okay. So they speak a different language, and there's a writing style. And Genevieve just turned the camera on, and Genevieve is the director of standards. I think I got the title right. Is that right? Yeah. But Genevieve is a key person at the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, and I've worked with her for 10, 12 years. I don't know how many long. It's like probably 200 years as far as she's concerned, working with me. But what we really did was we took the basic standard and we said, okay, let's make it look something like a health department looks like. Well, I just happen to be the chairman of the writing committee for the standard on water for pools and hot tubs. So I just pirated the entire standard and the general format of it, and we modeled it after that. So if when we get this published, and it's now published, a health inspector pulls up the standard, they're seeing something that already looks exactly like a copy on their shelf. That's all we're doing. Okay, that makes sense? Now, it looks entirely different than what you've seen in the past. But technically, this version, the body of the standard, is not necessarily written for you. It's written for the health department. I'm gonna pull up a shared screen here in a minute on here and show you some of the material in here. For you, the valuable material will be in the appendix in the back. That's where we put all the discussion in there. And so the standard tells you exactly what to do, but why you have to do it is in paragraph form. So it's two different portions of the standard in here. And this is a typical approach that's been used in industry. PHTA is going to a slightly different model in there, but we're not quite there yet for the Float Tank Association. But it's very, very similar to what a health official is going to say. Questions? Everybody nod your head like this if you understand. Thank you, Jackie, for nodding your head. Yes. Mm-hmm. Don't nod your head too much, Flux and Ashcon, or you'll poke your eye out. All right. All right. So let me do a quick share, screen share. And share. Okay. Now nod your head. Everybody nod your head if you can see my screen now. Thank you. All right. So it looks like the last version, but you'll see down here we've got May 2025 down here, version 3. And when it starts, it's got an introduction. It gives you some background on there, some nice reading material in here. That's not part of the body of the standard, but it's background. It's the introduction material. It talks about the concentration of salt. And we give credit to those that have gone before us. And it's like, and you can see some of the names on here that you might recognize, like this joker right here, him and here. Okay. But let's see if I can get a pointer on here. Where's the pointer? Forget that.
I think there's a pointer on the Zoom settings that you can use with a little drop down at the top.
Yeah. Well, all right. You can see in here, this is the scope in here. The kind of the table of, you've got the scope, the definitions, and Genevieve, if you're still on here, I admitted to both Justin and Jeannie, where most of the definitions came from. They came from the glossary from PHTA, and then we had to add a few over there. So it's like, so it looks very similar to what you're used to, Genevieve.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then we broke it up into different sections in here. So it's pre-float orientation, float tank operations, and then emergency procedures on here. And so it's just more detailed than what you've seen before. And you can see all the definitions in here, and we had a lot of fun writing those. What we started out with like 500 or something like that, and we whittled them down in there. But we got the same kind of guidelines we've got in other places in the FTA. Your pre-float orientation, tank operations and room management, and then contamination and emergency management procedures. And here, this is the same procedures that we've used elsewhere within the organization. And these are generally compliant with most of the parts in the Model Aquatic Health Code. We've taken exception in certain areas where we think we've got better science than they've got. We've got a better understanding of it. And then in the appendix back here is where you see some of the additional comments in here. And so this is all up on the open portion of the FTA website now up there. So it is published and readily available for you to pull up at any time and to look at that. And the last thing we want to do today is go through there and read every one of these things. We ain't gonna do that. All right. All right. All right. So it's a long document. It'll take you a while to get through it. But one thing we want to say and be very honest about right now is this is a living document. Matt said that on here. And so as we see things that we've either left out or we've got a little bit wrong, you send it in. We've got the email address. What is it? info@floatation.org. Is that right, Alex? Right. We just send an email into there, and then we will keep track of that. And we're not under a mandatory period of adjustment. If we were an ANSI procedure, American National Standard Institute procedure, like Genevieve manages for PHTA, a lot of those are under a 5-year revision cycle on here. So we can revise this at virtually any time that we want to, in case there's new information or mistakes in here. But it's really your responsibility to look through here. We think we've got it right. The board's looked through this, but it is now a guidance document for your operations. But let me also say that a standard is usually considered the minimum that you need to do. And so if it says in here, for instance, if it said measure this once a week, you could measure it every day and you would not be in violation of the standard. So you can go beyond what the standard says and still be compliant with the standard. Does that make sense? Flux is not shaking his head up and down. All right, so it's, what is it? It's 17 or 18 pages actually on here. And there's really only about 4 pages of actual standard and about the same number of pages of the appendix in the back of it. We scared Flux so bad he just lost his camera. So Ashkan was part of the original team, and he was part of this team before he went off to count penguins for the summer in Antarctica. Had anybody seen this before tonight, or were you waiting for the official rollout tonight?
Steen, are you talking to me?
Or anybody? Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I was on
just,
a date last week and I got in trouble for stopping to pause because I was just giddy reading all the terms. So
I wanted to mention how impressed I was when I saw this. I actually like stumbled into the last meeting of the sanitation committee completely on accident. And after Roy and I yelled at each other for a while, I think I really love this document. I think to reiterate what you said, Roy, I think having this in this language is so important right now, right? We really need to be able to interface with regulatory bodies in ways that shows the level of care and attention that we have given to all of this. And I think having this written in a language that would be respected by them, even though it makes it sound more complicated in certain ways, is so critical at this juncture for us to really be able to make sure that we have, you know, all of our ducks in a row, and that folks understand kind of that we take this seriously, and that everything that we're doing is standardized. So I love the language. I love when I looked through this when I had access to it at the last meeting, and I am just so grateful that this committee put this together.
Well, thank you, Flux, on here. The one thing we want to say is there's been conversation for years around the community. The long-term goal, I think, for most of the community is to make flotation a prescribable medical treatment. I mean, that's what Justin's wants. That's what Emily Leiber wants. Flux, you want it. Corey, you want it. I mean, so there's a bunch of us that believe that having flotation as a prescribable treatment. So we're moving in that direction, but slowly. But Emily's got her first NIH-funded grant, at their Liber. She'll be with us next in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, Kim, in Bellevue on here. And so one of the things that's going to happen once this gets flotation as a prescribable treatment is at a hospital, or say the large VA centers, some of them may be looking at the health and safety policies on here. And if we've got a safety-oriented document, and that's what this is, well-defined and in a format that looks like it belongs with the other class of standards, then that health and safety department at a large VA hospital or whatever is more likely to agree to let this type of practice be associated with their facilities. So this goes right along with the conversation that I've been having with Justin Feinstein for since like 2018 in here. So it's part of that long-term study to support where he's going on here. And I know Flux and Emily and Corey, you're aligned with that too. So it's just one more tool to expand the market. And it also may be something that some of you, we all get the question, well, is floating safe? You now have a document that looks like an official document that looks more formal than what we had before. It's a sales tool. You should consider this as a sales tool for those people that are a little bit nervous. Are they going to read it? Hell no, they're not going to read that. I mean, if they're going to read it, they probably need an extra 2 or 3 floats that day because they've got a lot of tension on them. But
Hey Roy, I wonder if we should open it up to some questions
sure.
right now. We got about 30 minutes left. And yeah, what are y'all thinking?
I saw a big smiley face from Sally down there at Fayetteville, Arkansas. Go Razorbacks. I know you're all looking at Flux's mustache and saying, Ashcon got him beat tonight. I know.
Roy, so, well, am I on?
No, we got you, Steven.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry. Where can we access this? And as you mentioned, like I know it's one thing to have digital, but for example, my health department, they're kind of weird about that stuff, and anything that we have on paper and also transferred digitally, they want to see the paper. So is this something that could be printed out so that we could have like a physical copy like you referred to in the very beginning?
Absolutely. This is up there on the FTA website. Which tab's it under, Alex?
I put the link in the chat directly to the PDF. Otherwise, it's under the sanitation and regulation part of the website.
Yeah, and Stephen is right. There are many health departments that will not like electronic copies up there.
Yeah, and I'll say today's not the first time I've seen it. I had my biannual, this is Matt down in Florida. I had my biannual health inspection on Tuesday for one of my centers, and I had it printed out. And not only printed out, but I went through and highlighted all the references to chlorine and how it should not be used, because that's the major pain point down here in Florida. So I was excited. I have a great relationship with it is very gentle. I do have to be very respectful. I've built a relationship with them, but part of the way I've built the relationship is I always show up with as much information as possible. And I was excited to present our new standard and remind them that, chlorine is not recommended, which that was one of the updates in this one compared to the previous one. It's much more clearly defined that I believe that the chlorine is not recommended in bold letters.
Yeah, it's like we took some of those hard-learned lessons that a few people had trouble with and emphasized those lessons. I see the smile, Jackie.
That kind of leads to another question. I was thinking, I've read both versions quite a bit, but were there any other changes between the previous and this one that are worth highlighting?
I really don't. I really think we just expanded a lot of the language on there. And I think virtually everything was covered in there. One thing that, in one of our team meetings, it's like, where did the 100 ppm maximum of hydrogen peroxide come from? I had no idea. And fortunately, Ashcon had not gone down to Antarctica to count penguins yet. And he was able to explain where that came from. So we took some of that hard-learned knowledge and we captured that. And so that's really the primary difference is some of the stuff that would not be known otherwise is now captured in there in a formal note I think that note is probably in the appendix, if I recall.
There is also one of the other things that I think is a nice update is just that, between the last version of this document and now, there have actually been like reported cases of illness in float tanks. So if there was like at the time of the 2017 and prior, like none of these incidents had occurred. And so now if a health department is looking into that and comes across that, this updated version explains what those are, addresses those, kind of explains how they aren't actually very representative of real commercial float tank operations and stuff like that. So it's also just been updated to like encapsulate new things that have happened in the world since the last version of it.
Yeah, and that's just the standard practice is what's changed and what do we know now that we did not know in 2017. And so we had the 3 documented outbreaks in float tanks, and all of them were using way less than 20% mag sulfate.
Also, Roy, I'm curious, and I just can't remember. In this update, did we break out the appendix from the actual standard?
Yes.
Yeah.
That
way
I think existed before. It was always like a separate appendix.
Yeah, it always had a separate appendix. We just like tripled the amount of verbiage in the appendix in there.
Right. I remember, a lot of the definitions we decided to remove because they weren't necessary, and kind of you you would always say, Roy, you don't want to give too much, like keep it very, very short and succinct to exactly what you need.
Yeah, yeah, it's what we started. I started with and Genevieve, so you'll know, it's like I went to the original 11 and got all 500 definitions, copied them over, and then we threw out 375 of them or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we had to go back and add a few back in there. But we did the same with Genevieve, and I had to do
Sounds
the same thing
familiar.
on the standard 11 we're working on.
Yeah, it
And
happens.
The
Yeah.
new version, in general, is also just more like specific and detailed than the prior one was. You know, we took single sort of more just general statements like, hey, it's good to use UV as, and then made it slightly more robust. Or, you know, it's good to use ozone, but here's actual specifics about air quality limitations. So there is just like more specificity, more detail, kind of added throughout the language that, in addition to it just being like formatted to be more kind of
Yeah.
official and standard like.
And there's certain trick words that you look for. It's like when you're supposed to do something, you use the word you shall do this. And you're not supposed to do something, you say you shall not do this. And when we write standards for the PHTA, even I made a mistake, and we like 4 weeks ago had to change one of my paragraphs because I had the wrong language in it on there. And so it's those little trick key words. It's the jargon that the health department is going to look for. So if it looks like it's written in jargon, it is written in jargon. Now, but the other thing we can add in here is up on the resources tab for the FTA, we do have fact sheets up in there. So if some of this stuff looks like it needs additional details, or you want additional descriptions in here, we can always produce additional fact sheets. And so the standard's got the basic material in here, but then the fact sheet can go as much deeper into detail on there as kind of a step by step if we need to do something like that. So you can have various levels of communication in your technical articles.
And another thing that I want to point out is the research study that you did, Roy. That I think when health departments read this, they're going to be able to cite that study, and I think that is just such a valuable resource for the industry in total. Do you want to say anything about that research that's in here?
We didn't rely tremendously heavily on that because we don't have that fully published yet on there. So one of the things that you would say in the future is when Laura Supis and I finally get that the microbiology study published, and we're at least 6 or 9 months away from that because we're tied up on other things at the moment. Then we would automatically then get that into a peer-reviewed journal and then open this standard back up and cite that as supporting evidence that you do not need chlorine in a float tank. And so then you have a standard supported by peer-reviewed journal articles in here. And so that's kind of what we try to do with as much as possible on here. The references in here all very much support the standard, and the references are listed and are publicly available. And I think we've even got most of them up on the website now that can be downloaded on here. So if the outbreak reports that we mentioned in here, it's the health department can go to that and read the fact that those facilities that had outbreaks were not in compliance with this standard. Because otherwise they're going to say, I've heard of outbreaks, but if they've got the information, say they did not follow the standard. So that does not apply to what we're doing here. We have gone well beyond that. Yeah, it's like the room maintenance. We spent a lot of time talking on the room maintenance issues in here. And we had several vigorous discussions on that.
Yeah, any other questions or comments or insights?
Julie,
If you don't mind, I was wondering when I was going through there, I had an issue last year with my USP grade salt, and it was so sandy that I had to return it. I got a letter back from Giles. I had a bag sent to them directly for analysis, and they sent back a letter saying, nope, this is the appropriate amount of sand that is allowed to be in your Epsom salt. And I was like, ugh. Is there a sanitation reason to use USP grade, or is it just that's the easy standard? And it's been, I know that it's been said to be okay to touch human skin, but has anybody actually had any actual sanitation issues other than obvious like minerals and browning issues from not using USP grade salt?
great question. What does everybody think? Has anybody had problems with Epsom salt quality?
It's a little bit of a tricky question to answer because oftentimes if you're buying non-USP grade salt from a company like Giles or PQ or like KNS in Europe, that can be a very different thing than buying non-USP grade salt from some other random company. Because often, the companies that also produce USP salt, it's just easy enough for them to like make the same salt. And the distinction between USP grade and non-USP grade could just come down to their testing requirements. So it's like you could buy non-USP grade salt and basically be getting the same USP grade salt from the manufacturers that make USP grade salt, or you could buy it from a totally different company and be getting something totally different. So it's just like it becomes a little bit harder to like objectively say like, oh, I haven't been having issues with this or without that, because it just adds a lot more variety to the variables in it, as opposed to getting USP grade, where you're just like, okay, there is at least something, some sort of like requirement and a certification, and we're getting some form of consistent product. I haven't personally heard of like actual documented sanitation issues from anybody from using non-USP grade. I also don't hear of a ton of people using non-USP grade. So there's that to consider too. I've also never heard of anyone before you saying that you found a bunch of sand in your salt either. So that's interesting to hear.
Well, one thing I do, I mix all my salt in a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket before I put it in my tank. I do that for a bunch of reasons. So had I not done that, if I was just like one of those throw salt, throw water in and allow the pump to mix it up, I would never have known. I would never have seen the sand. It's because I'm visually seeing that, like, as I'm mixing it on my hand drill, that like, man, that's not salt, what's in there. So I feel okay not using it because now I'm like, I'm mixing, I'm visually looking at it, and if there was anything extra in there, at least I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the advantages of using something like with a USP label on it is that's the kind of questions that health departments look for. They say, where are you buying your stuff? And if you've got some sort of certified grade material, then they will just move past that. But if suddenly they find that there's something that isn't USP and they're looking for a reason to give you trouble, you just gave them an excuse to dig deeper. And so it's almost, having a quality certificate of some variety reduces the number of questions that you get during an inspection. Doesn't always happen, but if they're coming in with a grudge, you don't want to give them any ammunition. Other questions? Oh, Stephen, I see your hand just went up.
I just have a comment. I knew you guys were working on this. I've just been skimming through it as we've been talking here, and I just want to say, like, This is so great. Roy, as always, like, thank you so much. Thank you, everything you do for the industry. I have had some issues with my health department, early on, and we've kind of, in my opinion, they make me do a lot of things I don't think are necessary. For example, I just see that you had in here, like, we don't really have to worry about the pH and alkalinity for certain levels. And I'm just wondering, like, we record it and it's not always accurate. Like, I don't want to rock the boat. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be like, well, look, it says here, we don't need to. Like, should I probably just kind of go on, like, filling out my daily logs and, like, whatever?
We got a couple of people on here that have a little bit of experience with bucking the health department. You probably don't want to buck them more than you absolutely have to,
Yeah.
and yeah, pain in the ass, you're doing extra work, but if they want you to do it and you don't do it, then they start digging
Yeah.
until they find something. And once they find something, then they're going to find something else. Then they're going to say, your toilet is 2 inches too close to the side wall. You need to jackhammer your bathroom and move your toilet over 2 inches. And they will find something like that. Look at Jackie's head, and Matt's shaking his head too. Yeah, they will come at, give them as little ammunition as possible, because they will use the ammunition against you.
Yeah. At one point though, like, they were having me test the water 3 times per day, which I think is wild. So I've at least got them to go down to 2 per day. I know some health departments don't require any checking at all, like in Maine. But like for the pH and alkalinity, for example, I tell my staff like basically exactly what was you guys wrote in here, that, like, the difference between a float tank and a pool, and how, because so we fortunately do get to use H2O2, so it's not like pertinent to us, the alkalinity and pH levels. So at least my staff knows, and they're in the light. And so, like, if we're off one day, or like it doesn't like we have to like fudge the numbers, or they miss it at night, it's like this isn't pertinent information that you guys have to be like worrying deeply about. But like you just said, I'm also not going to the health department and being like, hey, because of reason X, Y, and Z, we shouldn't have to do this, so I'm not going to do it. They tell us to do it, we do it. Is it always accurate? No, but at least our staff knows what's going on.
Right. So so part of it is in dealing with an obstinate health department is showing that you're doing the best job that you can. And, sometimes you just got to cave in and just do things you don't want to do. I mean, I had my own pool shut down a couple of times because some really stupid regulations on there. But every time that happens, it costs $135 to get them to come back out and take the sign off the gate. Mm-hmm.
And just for reference on pH and alkalinity, like we're not the only document that says it's not required for float tanks. The Model Aquatic Health Codes, like language on float tanks, also does not require pH and alkalinity, nor does the NSF like safety standard that they wrote for float tanks, nor does like Washington State's health department requirements for float tank sanitation. So if anybody out there is like their health department's on the fence, or they do want to present some documentation, like it's not just like an industry created document that is taking that stance. It is basically like every large reputable kind of like body of code that has been written about float tanks so far is all accepted that pH and alkalinity don't need to be measured. As long as you're not using chlorine or bromine.
Yeah, that's the secret, and that's where the health department tends to fall into that narrow-mindedness. The pH is critical for chlorine and bromine. Well, our sanitation is not dependent upon chlorine and bromine, and hydrogen peroxide is not a sanitizer, it's an oxidizer in this case. So it's a mindset situation that eventually we need to convince health departments a float tank is not full of water. It is full of a salt solution, and it is a different animal altogether.
One thing I want to chime in here too, because is that like as we move towards trying to increase legitimacy, and as like on the research side, we try to bring in more like evidence to show that this is beneficial and move it into a direction where this could actually be a treatment. All of this, these are all layers that are supportive of this, right? And hopefully we'll get to a certain point where it's viewed as it is, and then we can like demonstrate how all of this stuff is unnecessary, and we've done all of this work and we have all of these standards, and there's this incredible body of evidence to support all of this. And I think that it's so frustrating when health departments don't recognize that. But I really love how much this continues to move us forward, as so many different angles and portions of the community are working on different elements of this.
Flux, you just said something here that just gave me an interesting thought. We've got several military establishments using float tanks for PTSD. What regulations are they following? They're probably following the Model Aquatic Health Code, which is very similar to what we're saying in here. I'll bet we can get some guidance from, talk to them and get them, because if the military is doing this, that gives us a little bit more credibility on here because they have experience on here. And
I mean, absolutely. And I think going along with what you're saying, Roy, so much of this ends up being a game when you're working with regulators, right? Like we are doing our best job to make sure that, the people who float in our tanks are safe, and like as a community, the FTA and everything is working on this. But it still takes a level of legitimacy that sometimes the United States military can provide. So anything that we can get our hands on and also include as references in a document like this, I think would be useful, just to show, how seriously this is being taken and how much work has gone into understanding and setting these standards, so that when these pH things do come up, there's just more and more layers of support to show, like, look, look at what the military is doing. Look at what we did. Look at what all these other people are doing. Look at all of these things that have happened. But that just takes time. And that's the hard part.
yeah, yeah.
So we got about 7 minutes left. Anybody holding any juicy questions or any comments or thoughts?
What was your favorite part of the process to updating the standards?
What was my favorite aspect of it? Tonight, I'm done.
For now.
Yeah, it's like now Corey's now the chairman, so the next version has to be Corey's, right? Right. Yeah. All right.
Or your
No.
least favorite part? Would that be more fun to answer?
Actually, my most fun part was conning Corey into taking over the chairmanship at the last float conference. So, yeah.
I'm very susceptible to peer pressure.
Yeah, I think I
Mine
bought
was,
one beer at lunch, and that was it. Talk about
probably
a cheat day.
reading through hundreds of definitions and deciding what to keep and what was irrelevant.
That was your favorite part or your least favorite part?
I want to say my least favorite, but I also feel like I learned a lot. So like I didn't hate it. It was just time consuming.
There you go.
Yeah, it was well over 500 definitions that we pirated off of Standard 11, Genevieve. We just copied the whole thing over. Justin was laughing when I called him up a couple of weeks ago and told him what I did. So
A lot of work.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely planting the flag that that chlorine is not supposed to be in float tanks, and that to me was just epic because yeah, for many years, North Carolina Health Department mandated chlorine in float tanks, and it was just baffling to me. So You know,
because they were considering it a special purpose swimming pool.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Hey everybody.
How are you? Oh, hey, Woody.
Hey,
I had
yeah,
was
I was just going to jump in since we're getting close to time. I just want to mention that all of you that haven't met me yet, I'm Woody Chook. I'm the new executive director of the FTA. Um, I'm incredibly honored to be stepping in this role, supporting all of you as we continue to grow and strengthen this amazing industry. Obviously, as you've seen from this webinar, this is one big step in that. Um, and it's a perfect example of what makes this community so special, collaborative, thoughtful, committed to raising the bar from, as we just saw, the evolution of the previous standards and, formatting it and making it, beefing it up so it has some sort of more strength as a document to present to health inspectors, to, I don't know what holds the future, government officials, the military, um, legislators maybe at some point. But again, this is a huge thank you to Roy, Corey being the chair, to the Sanitation Regulation Committee, Jocelyn and Alex as staff members who helped get this all together and I guess coordinate all the meetings, get all you guys on task, and the whole editing process and everything. Thank you again to the community for showing up here, asking good questions, staying engaged, showing again the support of how we need to raise the industry through this document, as it's a big milestone for our industry, and we're proud to share it with all of you. So, I mean, unless there's other questions, we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Woody.
I just looked back at the a list of the previous people on the committee. The very first name for the first writing committee, John C. Lilly. So it goes way back, doesn't it? So it's just like we are standing on the shoulders of the giants that have gone before us. And some of them have bigger mustaches than I will ever have.
Well, I hope to see y'all in August. I look forward to seeing some of you and hopefully most of you in August. And it's been wonderful to share the screen with y'all. And yeah, thanks.
What's in August, Corey?
The Float Conference. At the Float Conference. Alex, you want to say anything about the Float Conference?
Just that I hope I see every one of you at the FTA booth. And I'm excited to go.
Anybody here be presenting?
Yeah, Flux, right? And Roy, maybe?
Yeah, Jackie, Matt, if you're going, if I'm talking on got a kind of a workshop on health departments. If you know anything about health departments, Jackie, yeah.
All right, I think
we know a few things.
Yeah, well, for the two of you, we'll have the bottle of Jack in the back of the room, so you can sit back there and slug on the Jack while everybody else is
There
fighting
you
it
go.
off.
We've earned it.
Yeah, you have. You've earned a full case of Jack.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna officially close the meeting, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye, all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.